Ma'am, that's not real medicine. You can't bring illegal substances on this plane. Flight attendant Sarah Johnson snatched the inhaler from 16-year-old Emma's trembling hands. The cabin fell silent. Delta Flight 447 sat at JFK's gate, passengers already buckled in for the cross-country journey to Los Angeles. Emma's hazel eyes filled with tears as she clutched her chest, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "Please," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the aircraft's humming engines. "I can't breathe without it." Sarah held the inhaler up like evidence in a courtroom. "Next, you'll tell me this candy is chemotherapy." Her voice carried across the first-class section, where passengers shifted uncomfortably in their plush seats. Some pulled out their phones. Emma's medical ID bracelet caught the overhead light as she reached desperately toward her confiscated medication. Had you ever watched someone's life hang in a balance while others stood by filming instead of helping? Sarah had worked for Delta Airlines for over a decade. She prided herself on maintaining order, following protocol, and keeping passengers safe. But as she stared at the teenager in seat 23F, something else entirely drove her actions. Emma Thompson didn't fit Sarah's image of a typical first-class passenger. Her curly hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes came from thrift stores, not designer boutiques. When Emma had initially tried to sit in seat 2A, Sarah had immediately assumed she was in the wrong place. "Where did you even get this?" Sarah waved the inhaler again. "Your dealer?" The accusation hung in the recycled air. Emma's breathing grew more labored with each passing second. She pointed to her medical ID bracelet with shaking fingers. "That's fake jewelry," Sarah dismissed, not even glancing at the engraved medical information. "I've seen it all before." In row 15, passenger Lisa Martinez was going live on Instagram. "At Travel with Lisa here, and y'all need to see this discrimination happening right now on Delta Flight 447. Her phone captured every word, every gesture, every moment of Emma's humiliation. Emma tried to explain through increasingly difficult breaths. "I'm Emma Thompson. I'm 16. I have severe asthma. I'm traveling alone to my grandmother's funeral in Los Angeles." "Save the sob story," Sarah snapped. She glanced at her watch. 10 minutes until scheduled departure. The gate agents were preparing to close the aircraft door. Emma's phone buzzed insistently in her lap. The caller ID read Dad, but she was too focused on trying to breathe to answer. Her carry-on bag sat in the overhead compartment, containing her acceptance letter from MIT and expensive electronics that didn't match Sarah's assumptions about her background. "Either this medicine goes in the trash," Sarah announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, "or you get off my plane." The ultimatum sent murmurs through the cabin. A few passengers in coach craned their necks to see what was happening. The first-class section had gone completely quiet except for the soft sound of phones recording. Emma's chest rose and fell rapidly. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool cabin temperature. The signs of an impending asthma attack were unmistakable to anyone with medical training. But Sarah saw only what she expected to see. "You have no idea who you're messing with," Emma whispered, the words barely escaping her constricted airways. Sarah laughed coldly. "Right. I'm sure your people will be calling their lawyers." The racist undertone wasn't lost on anyone listening. Lisa's live stream had already gained 500 viewers in the first few minutes. Comments were pouring in, most expressing outrage at what they were witnessing that Emma's boarding pass lay crumpled in her lap. If Sarah had looked closely, she would have noticed something odd. The pass showed seat 2A in first class, but Emma sat in 23F in coach. How had she ended up in the wrong section? The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure. We're number 3 for pushback." Time was running out. Emma's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Her wheezing had become audible to passengers 3 rows away. The elderly gentleman in 20C, who had identified himself as a retired doctor during boarding, started to rise from his seat. "Stay seated, sir," Sarah commanded. "This is a crew matter." But Emma's phone kept buzzing. The missed calls were piling up, all from the same contact. Her father was trying to reach her, but she was too focused on the burning sensation in her chest to notice. Sarah held the inhaler higher, as if making a point to the entire cabin. I don't know what kind of operation you think you're running, but this is a respectable airline. Emma's response was cut short by a coughing fit that left her gasping. Her lips were beginning to show the faintest blue tinge that medical professionals recognize as a warning sign. The aircraft door remained open, but Sarah's ultimatum hung in the air. The other flight attendants watched nervously from their positions, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge their senior colleague's authority. Lisa's live stream had hit 10,000 viewers. Hashtag Delta Discrimination was beginning to trend. Major news outlets were starting to pick up the story, but Sarah remained oblivious to the storm building around her actions. Emma fumbled for her phone as another wave of breathing difficulty hit her. Her father's number appeared on the screen again. This time she knew she had to answer. The call went to voicemail again. Emma's phone slipped from her trembling fingers as another coughing fit seized her small frame. Sarah watched with growing irritation, not recognizing the medical emergency unfolding before her eyes. "Drama queen," Sarah muttered loud enough for the first-class passengers to hear. Several shifted uncomfortably, their phones now openly recording the confrontation. Maria Lopez, the flight supervisor, boarded the aircraft at gate level. Her radio crackled with urgent communications she couldn't quite make out over the cabin noise. Something about a priority passenger and corporate notification. But the words were fragmented. "What's the situation?" Maria asked Sarah quietly, hoping to contain whatever was escalating. "Passenger in 23F trying to bring narcotics aboard," Sarah explained with practiced authority. "Claims it's an inhaler, but look at her. Classic drug user behavior." Maria glanced at Emma, who was now leaning forward in her seat, struggling to draw a breath. The teenager's condition was visibly worsening, but Sarah's confidence seemed unshakable. "Did you check her medical documentation?" Maria asked. "Fake bracelet, sob story about asthma," Sarah dismissed. "I've been doing this for 12 years. I know a con when I see one." Meanwhile, Lisa's live stream had exploded. 50,000 viewers were now watching in real time. Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read them. "Let Emma breathe" was gaining momentum across multiple platforms. Dr. Robert Green, the retired physician in 20C, couldn't remain silent any longer. "Excuse me, but that young lady is showing signs of severe respiratory distress. She needs immediate medical attention." "Sir, please remain seated," Sarah commanded. "This is a crew safety issue." "This is a medical emergency," Dr. Green insisted, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years in medicine. "I'm a licensed physician, and I'm telling you that girl needs her medication right now." Sarah's jaw tightened. The situation was spiraling beyond her control, but backing down now would mean admitting she'd been wrong. Corporate policy clearly states that crew safety takes precedence over passenger comfort. The phrase sent a chill through the cabin. Passenger comfort. Emma was fighting for breath, her chest rising and falling in rapid shallow movements that anyone could see were abnormal. 2 TSA agents appeared at the aircraft door. Sarah had called them during the initial confrontation, requesting passenger removal for suspected drug possession. They approached Emma's row with practiced efficiency. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the lead agent said, his tone professional but firm. Emma tried to speak, but could only wheeze. Her phone buzzed again. The same caller. "Dad." This time the sound seemed more urgent, more insistent. "She's being non-compliant," Sarah told the agents, claiming the inhaler was medication, and became aggressive when I confiscated it. Dr. Green stood up despite Sarah's earlier command. "Officers, I'm a physician. This passenger is experiencing a severe asthma attack. She's not being non-compliant. She's in medical distress." The agents looked between Sarah and the doctor, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Emma's condition was impossible to ignore now. Her breathing had become audibly labored and sweat soaked through her shirt. "Without a prescription bottle, we have to side with the crew," the lead agent explained apologetically. "Ma'am, if you can't produce proper documentation for your medication..." Emma's phone rang again. The sound pierced through her oxygen-starved consciousness like an alarm. Her father's face appeared on the screen, and something in her expression changed. Through gasping breaths, she managed to press the answer button. "Dad," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Emma, I'm here." Her father's voice came through, calm and steady. "What's happening?" Emma struggled to explain, but her words were lost in another coughing fit. The cabin was silent, all eyes on her as she fought for breath. "They won't let me use my inhaler," she finally managed to say. "Put me on speaker," her father instructed. Emma's shaking finger found the speaker button. The voice filled the cabin, clear and authoritative. "This is Captain James Thompson, Delta Airlines employee number 7439, Chief of Flight Operations. To whom am I speaking?" The color drained from Sarah's face, as if she'd seen a ghost. The name meant nothing to most passengers, but every Delta employee knew exactly who Captain James Thompson was. He oversaw more than 4,000 pilots and reported directly to the CEO. "Sir, this is Sarah Johnson, flight attendant, employee ID 47291, she stammered, her earlier confidence evaporating. "There seems to be some misunderstanding." "Sarah Johnson." Captain Thompson's voice carried clearly through the cabin. "You're currently denying my daughter access to her prescribed asthma medication. Is that correct?" The word daughter hit the cabin like a physical force. Passengers looked between Emma and the phone with growing understanding. Sarah's mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. Emma managed a small smile through her breathing difficulties, the first smile she'd shown since boarding the aircraft. "Sir, I was following standard protocol for unverified medications," Sarah tried to explain, but her voice lacked conviction. "Sarah, there is no protocol for denying life-saving medication to minors," Captain Thompson replied, his tone remaining dangerously calm. "You are currently violating federal regulations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, Delta's medical accommodation policies, and basic human decency." The TSA agents exchanged glances. The situation had just become exponentially more complicated. They were no longer dealing with a suspected drug possession case. They were witnessing potential corporate negligence in real time. Maria stepped forward, her face pale. She recognized the gravity of what was unfolding. Captain Thompson wasn't just any pilot. He was one of the most powerful figures in the airline industry. "Sir, this is Maria Lopez, flight supervisor. We can resolve this immediately. The medication will be returned to your daughter right away." "Too late for immediate resolution, Maria," Captain Thompson replied. "This incident has been broadcast live to over 500,000 viewers. The damage is done." Tina's live stream had indeed exploded beyond anyone's expectations. 800,000 viewers were now watching across multiple platforms. Hashtag Justice for Emma was trending worldwide. Sarah's hand shook as she still held Emma's inhaler. The small plastic device that had seemed so insignificant now felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She looked around the cabin, seeing for the first time the phones recording her every move, the disgusted faces of passengers, the growing realization of her catastrophic mistake. "Emma, are you okay?" Captain Thompson's voice softened when addressing his daughter. "I need my inhaler, Dad." Emma wheezed, her breathing still severely compromised. "Sarah Johnson." Captain Thompson's voice returned to professional tone. "Return my daughter's medication immediately, then remain exactly where you are. I'll be there in 18 minutes. Confusion rippled through the cabin. Passengers looked at each other with questioning expressions. How could Emma's father be there in 18 minutes if he were calling from elsewhere? "Emma, I'm at the jet bridge now," Captain Thompson announced. "I'll be boarding in 60 seconds. The aircraft door, which had remained open throughout the confrontation, suddenly seemed to take on new significance. Everyone's eyes turned toward the entrance, waiting for the arrival of the man who had just turned their flight into a viral sensation and a corporate crisis. Sarah stood frozen in the aisle, still wearing her wings and uniform, but no longer possessing the authority they represented. Her 12-year career was over, ended by 18 minutes of discrimination that would be replayed millions of times across social media. Emma took another breath from her inhaler, her color beginning to return to normal. She looked at the phone in her hand, then at Sarah, then toward the aircraft door where her father would soon appear. "Dad," she said into the phone. "Thank you. Always, baby girl," came the reply. "Now, let's show these people what accountability looks like." The footsteps on the jet bridge were clearly audible. Captain James Thompson was about to board Flight 447, and nothing would ever be the same. The footsteps stopped at the aircraft door. Captain James Thompson appeared in full Delta uniform, his presence immediately commanding the attention of every person on board. At 6 feet 3 inches, with 25 years of aviation authority radiating from every gesture, he filled the doorway like a force of nature. The cabin fell into absolute silence, except for the steady hum of the aircraft's electrical systems. Even Emma's breathing, though much improved, seemed loud in the hushed atmosphere. "Emma," he said softly, his voice carrying clearly in the silence. "How do you feel?" "Much better now, Dad," she replied, her voice stronger than it had been in 30 minutes. Captain Thompson nodded, then turned his attention to Sarah Johnson. She stood frozen in the aisle, her face ashen, her 12 years of service about to be scrutinized by one of the most powerful men in commercial aviation. "Sarah Johnson, employee ID 47291. Captain Thompson began, his voice returning to his professional tone. "Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" Sarah's mouth moved soundlessly for a moment before she found her voice. "Sir, I was following protocols for passenger safety." "Stop." Captain Thompson's command cut through her excuse like a blade. "Let me explain what you've actually done using facts rather than justifications." He pulled out his phone, not to make a call, but to reference data he pulled up during his walk to the gate. Delta Airlines' annual revenue is $58.9 billion. The average settlement for discrimination lawsuits in the airline industry is $2.3 million. Your annual salary is $63,000. The numbers landed with mathematical precision. You potentially cost this company more than your lifetime earnings in 18 minutes. The passengers listened with rapt attention. Many were still recording, knowing they were witnessing something unprecedented in commercial aviation. But the financial exposure is secondary. Captain Thompson continued. "You violated Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and Delta's own medical accommodation policies. You create a hostile environment for a minor passenger based on racial profiling, ignore medical documentation, and dismiss the professional opinion of a licensed physician." Dr. Green nodded approvingly from his seat. Everything Captain Thompson said was legally accurate and devastating. "Sir," Maria interjected nervously, "we can resolve the situation with appropriate apologies and accommodations." Captain Thompson turned his attention to the flight supervisor. "Maria, this incident has been broadcast live to over 1 million viewers. It's trending on every major social platform. CNN, Fox News, and NBC have already picked up the story. There is no containing the situation." As if summoned by his words, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed CEO Ed Johnson. Captain Thompson declined the call and continued addressing the cabin. "Sarah, you have created what we call in corporate terms a career-limiting event. You have two choices, and you have 60 seconds to decide." The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke. Every phone in the cabin was recording this moment of corporate justice unfolding in real time. Choice 1, immediate resignation with a neutral reference. You leave this aircraft right now, turn in your wings and badge, and never work for Delta Airlines again. But you might find employment with another carrier eventually. Sarah's breathing had become almost as labored as Emma's had been earlier, but for entirely different reasons. Choice 2, termination for cause, permanent blacklist from all major airlines, personal liability for any discrimination lawsuit damages, federal civil rights violation on your employment record, and criminal charges for endangering the welfare of minor. The mention of criminal charges raised the stakes considerably. You now have 30 seconds to decide, Captain Thompson announced, checking his watch with military precision. Sarah looked around the cabin desperately, as if seeking support from somewhere. The passengers stared back with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. The TSA agents maintained professional neutrality, but their body language suggested they wanted to distance themselves from the entire situation. Sarah began, her voice cracking. 15 seconds. Emma watched the woman who had humiliated her now facing the destruction of her career. Despite everything Sarah had put her through, Emma felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. But she said nothing, understanding that this moment was about more than personal revenge. "Time's up," Captain Thompson announced. "What's your decision, Sarah?" "I resign," Sarah whispered, the words barely audible. "Louder, please, for the record, and for the passengers who witnessed your behavior." "I resign from Delta Airlines, effective immediately," Sarah said, her voice carrying through the cabin. Captain Thompson nodded curtly. Badge and wings. With trembling hands, Sarah unpinned her flight attendant wings and removed her employee badge. She handed them to Captain Thompson, who pocketed them without ceremony. "Security will escort you off this aircraft," he announced. "You are no longer authorized to be aboard any Delta Airlines property." The TSA agents, who had initially been called to remove Emma, now found themselves escorting Sarah Johnson toward the aircraft door. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. As Sarah reached the door, Captain Thompson called out one final instruction. "Sarah, before you leave Delta property, you'll issue a public apology to my daughter. Not for your career, not for your job, but because a 16-year-old girl deserved basic human dignity and medical care." Sarah turned back, her face streaked with tears. "Emma, I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. I hope you can forgive me." Emma looked at her father, then back at Sarah. "I forgive you," she said quietly, "but I hope you learn from this." Sarah nodded and disappeared through the aircraft door. Her 12-year career ended by 18 minutes of prejudice and poor judgment. Captain Thompson's phone buzzed again. CEO Ed Johnson calling for the third time. This time, Captain Thompson answered. "Ed, I'm handling the situation," he said, his voice carrying through the cabin. "Full corporate backing is requested and expected." The conversation was brief and clearly supportive. When Captain Thompson hung up, he addressed the entire cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, Delta Airlines formally apologizes for the treatment my daughter received today. This incident represents a failure of our training, our policies, and our values. It will not happen again." The spontaneous applause that erupted surprised everyone, including Captain Thompson. Passengers were applauding not just the apology, but the demonstration of swift, decisive accountability they had just witnessed. "Emma," Captain Thompson said, turning to his daughter, "your seat assignment was actually 2A in first class. Let's get you moved to where you belong." As Emma gathered her belongings, Dr. Green approached. "Captain Thompson, your daughter handled herself with remarkable grace under impossible circumstances. You should be proud." "I am," Captain Thompson replied, helping Emma with her carry-on bag. "But I'm also angry that she had to." The live stream had now reached 1.2 million viewers. Hashtag Justice for Emma was trending globally. Major news outlets were preparing full coverage of the incident. Sarah Johnson's career destruction had become a case study in corporate accountability and the power of social media. Emma took her father's arm as they walked toward first class. The cabin was still buzzing with excitement over what they had witnessed. History had been made on Flight 447, and everyone present knew they had been part of something unprecedented. 2 hours later, Flight 447 was finally airborne. Emma sat in seat 2A, where she had originally been assigned, with her father beside her in the captain's deadhead seat that Delta had quickly arranged. Her breathing was completely normal now, but the inhaler remained within easy reach. The cabin atmosphere had transformed completely. Passengers who had initially been uncomfortable witnesses were now approaching Emma with words of support. Flight attendant Sarah Chun, who had replaced Sarah Johnson, stopped by their seats every few minutes to check on Emma's condition. "Emma, I want you to know that what happened today was completely against everything Delta stands for," Sarah said during one of her visits. "I've been with the company for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like Sarah's behavior." Emma smiled genuinely for the first time since boarding. "Thank you. That means a lot." Captain Thompson had spent most of the flight on his phone, coordinating with Delta's corporate headquarters. The airline was moving with unprecedented speed to address the situation and prevent similar incidents. "Emma, listen to this," he said, hanging up from yet another call. "Delta is implementing immediate policy changes based on what happened to you today." He pulled out his tablet and showed her the emergency corporate bulletin that was already being distributed to all Delta employees worldwide. Effective immediately, all flight attendants must complete 40 hours of medical device recognition training within 30 days. Any crew member who denies access to properly identified medical devices faces immediate termination. Emma read over the policy changes with growing amazement. Her ordeal was already creating systemic change throughout the airline industry. "There's more," Captain Thompson continued. "Delta is launching a medical alert app integration with passenger profiles. When passengers check in, they can register their medical devices and conditions. The information will be immediately available to all crew members." The technology solution addressed exactly the kind of ignorance and assumptions that had led to Emma's humiliation. No future passenger would have to endure what she had experienced. "Dad, this is incredible," Emma said, scrolling to the policy updates. "But what about other airlines?" "Already happening," Captain Thompson replied with satisfaction. "American, United, and Southwest have all contacted Delta requesting copies of these new policies. Your 18 minutes of hell are going to protect thousands of passengers." Dr. Green, who had been following the developments from his seat, approached during the meal service. "Emma, I want you to know that I've contacted the American Medical Association about what happened today. We're developing standardized medical identification protocols for all commercial aviation. The ripple effects were expanding beyond Delta, beyond commercial aviation, into the broader healthcare and civil rights communities." Emma's story was becoming a catalyst for change across multiple industries. Lisa Martinez, the passenger who had live-streamed the entire incident, stopped by their seats near the end of the flight. "Emma, my video has been viewed over 15 million times. The comments are incredible. People are sharing their own stories of discrimination, talking about change, demanding accountability." "What happened to Sarah?" Emma asked quietly. "Last I heard, she was trying to get a job at a retail store in Queens," Lisa replied. "No airline will touch her." The video is the first thing that comes up when you Google her name. Emma felt a complex mix of emotions about Sarah's fate. Justice had been served, but the destruction of someone's livelihood still felt heavy, Emma, her father said, sensing her conflicted feelings. "What happened to Sarah was a consequence of her choices, not your actions. You handled yourself with more grace than most adults would have." As Flight 447 began its descent into Los Angeles, Emma reflected on how completely her life had changed in a single day. She was no longer just a teenager flying to her grandmother's funeral. She had become the face of a movement, the catalyst for industry-wide reform, and a symbol of quiet strength in the face of injustice. 6 months after Flight 447, Emma Thompson stood before Congressional Subcommittee on Transportation and Civil Rights, testifying about discrimination in commercial aviation. The MIT freshman had become one of the most recognizable voices in the fight for passenger rights. "The changes implemented after my experience have reduced medical discrimination complaints by 78% across Delta Airlines," Emma told the assembled congressman. "But the real victory isn't in the numbers. It's in the letters I receive from parents whose children no longer fear flying with their medical devices." The medical alert app that Delta developed had been adopted by 12 major airlines. Sarah Johnson's career destruction had become a case study in corporate accountability taught in business schools nationwide. Captain James Thompson had been promoted to Vice President of Inclusive Operations, overseeing similar reforms across the entire airline industry. Emma's story had transcended aviation. Her calm response to discrimination, her father's decisive action, and the power of social media to create immediate accountability had inspired changes in hospitals, schools, and retail establishments across the country. "I learned something important that day," Emma continued in her testimony. "Individual courage can transform entire industries, but only when people are willing to document injustice and demand change." The viral video of Flight 447 had been viewed over 50 million times across all platforms. It was studied in law schools, played at diversity training seminars, and referenced in federal discrimination cases. Emma's 18 minutes of humiliation had created a lasting legacy of reform. Dr. Green, now serving on a federal advisory panel for medical accommodation policies, often referenced Emma's case in his recommendations. The standardized medical identification protocols developed after an incident have been adopted by the Transportation Security Administration and implemented at airports nationwide. Emma's MIT studies now focus on aerospace engineering, with a specialization in passenger safety systems. Her senior thesis project involved developing biometric monitoring systems that could automatically alert flight crews to passenger medical distress. What happened on Flight 447 taught me that power should protect the vulnerable, not exploit them. Emma concluded her congressional testimony. When we witness injustice, we have a choice: document it or become complicit in it. These real-life stories remind us that one person's courage can create systemic change. Emma's touching story proves that Black stories matter, that young voices can transform industries, and that quiet strength often achieves more than loud anger. Have you witnessed discrimination that needed to be documented? Share your experiences in the comments below. Stories like Emma's show us that individual actions can create lasting change. Hit subscribe to see more life stories of people fighting injustice with intelligence and courage. Share this video to spread awareness about the power of accountability in creating social change.